Good morning. Just making sure that you guys can hear me as well. All good?
I can hear
Okay,
you.
perfect. Well, thank you so much again for being here today. Of course, we're really sorry we can't be there all together in person, but our group, we're just absolutely thrilled to be talking to you about fundraising for nonprofit news. I'm joined today by my colleagues in fundraising. Lisa Baumer, the Director of Individual Giving at PRX, Michelle Hood, the Director of Development Director at Charlottesville Tomorrow, Steve Katz, whom you've heard from probably yesterday, publisher at Mother Jones, and Lauren Lynch, the Development Director of the Texas Observer. And thank you to whomever put together this really amazing opening slide. um, so, today we had initially pitched this session with the intention of bringing together our collective fundraising experience. And that included a background in nonprofit law and for example, in my case, arts and culture. And we've really identified some of these unique challenges and opportunities when working in this sector. So we really wanted to bring those to light. And I'm just going to go ahead and acknowledge that when we are prepping for this session, that we as an industry were dealing with this pandemic as well as a call for racial justice. So in some of these cases, we're going to layer that lens on top of our talking points today, just to make it more timely and more relevant. But what we really wanted today was to just host a really honest kind of conversational, candid talk story with you all. Because really, at the end of the day, what it boils down to is, what are the frustrations that we're living with every day as fundraisers, as organizations? And what is it that's going to be driving us in our work on a day-to-day basis? So with that, I am just going to go ahead, and share my slides. Just one second.
Mariko, I think I changed it to multiple participants can share screens simultaneously. Are you able to now share your screen?
I think so. I'm seeing it. Is everyone else seeing it?
We are not.
A lot of no's.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
Okay, great.
I think you're good.
Thanks so much. We'd love to just get started with Michelle and this question of, how are we doing our jobs these days?
So I work for Charlottesville Tomorrow, and we're a fairly small nonprofit, local-only news outlet. There are only 7 of us on the team, so we wear many hats. And part of what I do for the organization is I work on the mid-level funnel. So I work on the email subscribers and getting those people to convert to being part of what we call our reader revenue program, which is our membership program. And Charlottesville Tomorrow has been participating in the Night Lenfest table stakes program since last August. So we were super fortunate to be examining all of our systems around our mid-level funnel growth with the help of our coaches from the table stakes and also INN coaching. And a lot of the counseling that we had gotten was, be prepared. Be prepared for that moment when something is going to happen that your systems need to be set up in place. And luckily for us, we were just barely prepared when things changed as far as our fundraising, planning, and messages due to the COVID pandemic. We actually did not cover public health prior to the pandemic, and we switched to begin to cover public health because of it. So we had a lot to message about. And one of our big changes, and I'm sure a lot of you who are fundraisers here experienced this as well, is that we had planned a typical traditional spring fund drive campaign. And we really had to reconsider that, work quickly, switch to a more ongoing messaging. That was something that we had been counseled to do and hadn't quite made the switch, but we had to rise to the occasion pretty quickly. So that meant for us really doing more continuous messaging about fundraising, having our asks more in front of people. And it was very successful for us to make that switch. We also had some trepidation, as I'm sure many of you did, about the right timing for asking during this time. And again, we received a lot of advice that it was not the wrong time to ask, that it was in fact the right time to ask. And it was also the right time to educate our readers about the meaning of nonprofit news, the difference of nonprofit news, the way we work for the community, and why it's important to give now even more than ever. So that was our big changes this spring so far.
Yeah, leading into this, Lisa, I know, these honest and authentic relationships are really foundation of what we do as part of our fundraising work. And I was wondering if you can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'll just say I'm really happy to be here and excited to not only be speaking with you all, but to learn from you all. So yeah, one thing that has really been re-emphasized for me over the past few months in the midst of the COVID pandemic and in the midst of the last few weeks of everything that's been going on is just a core fundraising principle is that, it is so important to build real, authentic relationships with our donors. I personally really believe that the best, most honest and successful fundraising happens when we're connecting our organization's work and mission directly with the interests and passions of our donors. When donors are supporting us for reasons that are mission aligned and really authentic, and not just in a transactional pay for what you use sort of way. I think it's obvious that retention rates and gift amounts increase. But also, I think in moments of crisis, when we have donors that are aligned with our mission and really connected in a deep way with the work we do, these donors are going to stay close to us in these moments of crisis. And I have really seen that. I've witnessed this firsthand. So I work at PRX, which is a national public media organization, a distributor of content, a creator of content, a builder of technology for podcast and audio creators. And so we have a national donor base. And, over the last few months, I have just seen that there's a big difference between these donors who are directly connected to our mission and those who may give to us because they attend an annual event, which of course our big annual event was canceled, like I'm sure many of your events were. There's just a difference. We saw the people who truly were in line with the core of what we do stay with us, and they haven't really missed a beat in terms of giving. But those who, just to be frank, didn't have as deep of a relationship with us and maybe just gave because they attended that annual event, it's been harder just generally to stay in touch with those folks. I think this developing of real and authentic relationships, it's not just about mission. It also means that you genuinely care about your donors and you're not treating them as ATMs. I think this mentality of caring and treating your donors with respect and as human beings who are smart and can think for themselves is applicable to all levels of donors and all sorts of communications that we're sending out to our donors. To provide an example of one way that in my work in recent months, we've really tried to connect on a personal level with donors. We initially, right as COVID was taking hold, mobilized to send out a communication about our organization's response, which, was moving a daily international newsroom into people's homes and closets, and providing resources to public radio stations across the country. And so we put together a communication that went out from our CEO. And then I did work on a really personal basis with our donors, following up individually on that communication to really just ask how people were doing. Where are you quarantining? How is your family doing? And we got a great response to that, and it mattered. And we've continued to send out kind of these high-level strategic communications, and I've continued to touch base with donors. And I think over, this matters not just in moments of crisis, but every day. And I think over the long term, the results that we see will matter. And I also think that this matters not just for money, but also for mission, that we want to be the type of organization that treats our donors well. So these are the things that I've really been thinking about lately.
Totally. Thanks, Lisa. I do want to, add a quick note that, for example, at Honolulu Civil Beat, we took this opportunity to understand our donors in the multifaceted way that they operate in the world. So as new donations were coming in, we recognized that we are among a number of other nonprofits that they were giving to. And so understanding it from that lens, rather than just from the lens of the newsroom, but the fact that they were giving to, certain human service organizations. And we're able to, with a lot of this like influx of new, probably one-time donations, look at them and do that initial prospect research. Having, because we had recently just postponed our spring campaign, which would have been scheduled for April and May. But that does lead really wonderfully into, sorry. Oh, okay. Our next point of looking at what does it take to cultivate these new donor relationships during a time like this. And Steve, I'm going to call you in to answer this question of what does fundraising look like without the room?
Where did you get that picture?
Google.
Oh my God. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here this morning. I was thinking, listening to what Mariko and Michelle and Lisa said, and
hey, Dwayne.
So I was calling. I wanted to, and I put it in an email. I know Lisa.
Oh yeah, I saw it.
Anybody,
okay.
Don, could you move?
I think we can't overuse the word investment.
You guys get your Zoom act together.
Definitely.
So this has been a great conference because the same thing happened at the session I did yesterday.
Oh no!
Where two people shared their screens and we were like looking at people like W and everything. It was kind of hilarious. So anyway, lesson number one: what does the fundraising room look like? It looks like you have control over your own Zoom activity.
The other thing.
Hang on, Steve. We're working on it.
Okay, that's great. There we go. I have nothing else to say, actually. That was a brilliant move. So I just wanted to thank whoever that was for like preempting all of my conversation. So Mariko, what did you want me to talk about?
What does our relationships, what does our work look like now that, at least temporarily, we can't meet in person, especially how important that is for these new donor relationships that often, require us to reach out right away because we're top of mind, at least,
Yeah. As far as new donors go, and I'm kind of a broken record on this. In fact, I woke up partly thinking about this morning. I am honestly not sure what our relationship building process, our workflow will look like under the circumstances that we've been dealt, and where safety is paramount. And we have to develop techniques, if you like, for building trusted relationships with people who don't know us in the absence of the the tools that we've used in the past, which is basically built around in-person relationship building, whether it's one-on-one or events of some kind or another. So, we've started to test, and I mentioned this at my session yesterday, various kinds of very small scale screen-based events with friends of a host who knows us, as a way to comfortably introduce people who don't know much about us into the Mother Jones environment. And then we would back that up with both kind of in-depth conversation with the host about who's in the room, the virtual room, and then also research that we would do ourselves. Will that work? I don't know. We're really at an early stage of that. And I think we're all going to have to really share our experiences in things like that as we develop relationships with new donors. I will add one more thing to what Lisa and Michaud and Mariko were talking about. Certainly in the early weeks of the pandemic, where we were all adjusting to this new situation, we ended up stopping fundraising for quite a while. We felt that it was our folks were not ready to have a donative conversation, and instead what we wanted to do was, as Mariko mentioned, is really get to know the donors in this extreme moment, and just connect on a human level. And partly that was, we were kind of being given permission to do that because it appeared at the early times that we were all in this together in the same way. And of course, that is not true, that we are all in this together, but not in the same way. But it opened up a conversation with folks that was in a way more intimate, more personal than the usual, oftentimes the usual fundraising conversation is designed to be, where you have a task, you have to get to the close, or you have to move the donor towards a close or something like that. So it was in a way kind of a liberating experience for us to have these more personal conversations where we were talking about our shared experience. And I don't know if it was because of that or because folks were looking around at the emerging disinformation around the pandemic, and then certainly the attacks and disinformation and brutal attacks on folks involved in the civil uprising and journalists covering that story, that we found that some donors, in fact, some major donors, were in a position to and ready to make pretty meaningful gifts. It's not going to solve our budget problem for the coming year, but it was kind of an amazing demonstration of loyalty that gave us a lot of hope that we will get through this process, this period, intact. So let me stop there and hope this thing doesn't break again.
Mariko, if it's all right, I have something to add to Steve's comments. I think, given that even just the title of this presentation, Challenges and Opportunities, I think this current moment provides both. And I think to Steve's point about virtual events, we have done across the organization a lot of testing and trying of different formats for engaging audiences. And I do think that in some ways, this environment where everybody is online really does level the playing field for connecting with folks, particularly at the mass kind of lower level donor stage, where you're able to put together opportunities for connection for folks that we maybe just wouldn't have thought to do a virtual event before. We were so focused on in-person podcast events, for example. I just had a conversation yesterday speaking on the more major giving side of things, which is the focus of my work, about donor recognition opportunities and how in this world, perhaps hosting a virtual cocktail party or dinner party with one of our journalists or talent is something that we want to offer to major donors, which, because we're a national organization, hadn't really been available to us previously as an option, or just, and not that it hadn't been available, but we hadn't thought of it. So I think that there really are ways to look at the bright side of things, even as there are challenges that we face in this moment for engaging donors.
Definitely. I know, Lauren, you wanted to talk a little bit more about your experience this past year about with your canceled event.
Yeah, absolutely. We at the Texas Observer, we host an annual gala fundraiser event. It's our only major kind of in-person big event that accounts for about $250,000 of our annual budget, which is quite a hefty chunk. And so, of course, like canceling this was a necessity for the safety of our community. And it was an easy choice to make in that sense. But that left us, of course, with a very large, budget gap. And as Steve pointed out, you have to start asking yourself when we came into the pandemic, what everybody's comfort level is. Where are we looking at in terms of when is the right time to start asking people for money, especially when you're talking about these really giant sums potentially. And it left us as an organization having to really step back and look at our own comfort level, both from our board's perspective, from our volunteer committee that was organizing the event itself, even for our staff and even for me, when is the right time to start asking people for money, and when you're asking for these giant sums. And we've ended up kind of backing away, and we were creating smaller virtual events at the lower levels in particular to bring in new people. But a big part of it has been taking our board members and going to the really dedicated people that have been giving to this event since its inception 14 years ago, and really approaching them and telling them from a perspective of having this really honest and authentic relationships that Lisa was talking about earlier. It wasn't as hard to go to those folks and say, hey, here's the situation right now. You guys have stepped up before and kept the Texas Observer going. We're going to do it again. And they've really shown up and really come through. And from just that specific effort to people, that have been giving to Molly, as it's called, since its inception, we've raised about $200,000 of that money back. And at the same time, we also began sharing that message, about a month and a half, 2 months in to the pandemic of, we had to cancel this event. This is what our budget looks like. We just wanted to give you an update to a lot of our major donors, who then, even without having to ask them, they stepped up and were like, here's an extra gift this year because we really care about the mission and the core value of this organization. And we know it's important for us to give a little bit extra right now if we can. And I think that focus on that helped bring in those extra dollars and helped also further those relationships on, quite honestly, because that where the people stand in terms of have been giving to you for a long time. And it really helps shine a light, as we've all kind of mentioned in some capacity already in this conversation, about what our donor base looks like and how best to mobilize them at this time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lauren. In preparing for this session, we talked a lot about this idea of an ideal donor for nonprofit news, and that is someone that is not necessarily coming again for that kind of transactional experience, but thoroughly and is deeply seated kind of in your mission. And that can be very different, I think, from other organizations. And those donors come to and make contributions without those strings attached. And that, I think, is very crucial for the work that we do, knowing that we have to maintain the trust of the larger community, and kind of any indication that trust is waning, you lose your most important currency. So let me just move on to kind of our last slide before we get into questions from the audience. So thank you so much for being patient. This kind of last point is, how do we talk about our work, both now and kind of in the long term? And I'll just begin by saying, I looked at this question and I kind of went back into my days of working in arts and culture and in working in museums, where in some cases it's much easier to convey this question of impact. And that means kind of like the number of people served, the number of programs that we put on, And working in an online media, of course, we didn't have that necessarily at our disposal, but there is, of course, these certain comps that we have. At Honolulu Civil Beat, we look at reach, those numbers, as well as engagement. And all of those, because we work in this online platform, we have at our fingertips. And something like a story, we can look at kind of the engaged time as to like how long someone will read a story, as well as how many unique visitors had visited our website. And those are really powerful metrics to convey, not only to kind of grant funders, but as well as on an individual basis. So we have that kind of quantifiable metric. And we're fortunate enough, we also use CIR's impact tracker to look at the impact of a story over time. Before, to be honest, we used to punch in kind of the impact of our story into this like massive Google spreadsheet. And now there's a way that we kind of organize it through a specific form that we can indicate, that this story had an impact kind of on an individual basis, someone, changing their behavior in their community, as well as perhaps being shared by some other media outlet, or even having some effect, on a large scale kind of policy level. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there, that we are talking, with these kind of key indicators in mind. And that has been a very powerful talking point, especially in grant applications. And, with kind of our recent events in mind, Civil Beat has been kind of showing by doing, I would say. And for example, we have upped our publication days from 5 to 7. And we have messaged it in a way that our entire reporting staff will be looking at coronavirus and reporting from their individual beats. And so in that way, we're kind of looking at what we normally do in terms of watchdog explanatory journalism, but really tailoring that to what's happening today. And Lauren, I'm going to call you back in because I know you had a few points to say about how kind of our end, the business side, the operations and fundraising works with editorial.
Yeah, I was just kind of actually thinking about too, as we were planning this, or prepping rather, for this conversation that we're having today as a group, our speakers, we would get on a couple of Zoom calls, and it ended up being more of a kind of like, this is all the stuff I'm freaking out about right now, sort of conversation that we were having. And I think that it's really great today to have this conversation with you and be able to kind of open that floor up to y'all to come forward with any of those thoughts about what's freaking you out today. I'm sure that there are many, many things, but personally, for me, I'm a very collaborative worker. I get really inspired from conversations with my colleagues. And as we shifted to working remotely, I noticed that I was really missing that in the office space kind of conversations that happen, and you get creative and you get ideas from that. And so I'm really missing that personally, just in my own, like, how I work from home kind of jam. But also in terms of how we work, I realized that we had to start being really, as much as possible, connected to editorial, and really be keeping that conversation going that was normally kind of happening just on its own naturally in the office space. And, we've always kind of had weekly meetings with our editor-in-chief, but now we really stick to them, and we have much longer ones. We also have weekly, all staff meetings where we get to hear what everyone's working on. And I also just really work hard to keep in touch with all the writers and editors, just to like see what they're doing this week. What are they working on? We have access to the story planning Airtable that editorial uses, and just that effort to know what's going on. If there's a piece coming out about tracking COVID cases in rural Texas, I want to know about it ahead of time so that I can send a note to my donor that I know is really interested in this topic. And being able to have that kind of constant flow of information, I think it takes a lot more effort in this sort of new reality that we're living in, where we're all having to, do this Brady Bunch kind of Zoom call thing all the time. And it takes a lot more effort, and you kind of have to factor that into your day, which makes it a little bit more difficult and a little bit more of a thing you have to plan for. But I've always felt that it's really important to keep in touch with editorial, because I think it's a big part of our jobs and how we communicate the importance of their work and what they're doing. And I think, again, it's just something that we really have to work a lot harder for to do and accomplish at this point.
No, totally. I definitely agree. And I'm just going to throw it out there that our fundraising team at Civil Beat and has maybe selfishly, I don't know, inserted ourselves into this process. We, with the help of our audience development engagement manager, help put together the daily newsletter so that we are not only kind of aware about what stories are coming out, but kind of in that planning phase, also know kind of what's coming down the pipeline too. Okay, I'm gonna just open this up to kind of questions from the audience. Jeffrey, I don't know if you can help us if some kind of floated in.
Absolutely, there's a lot of good questions coming in. Thank you for everyone participating. The first question is from Mary at Dallas Doing Good. Mary wants to know, generally from the panelists, how are you gauging what is most important to your audience? Clicks, stats, surveys, individual conversations as an example. Any of these speaking to the highest and best version for your donors?
This kind of goes with what Mariko was talking about, I think, with tracking impact. And I'll let her say more about that, but I just wanted to make one note that I think there can be a tendency to rely too much on some of these digital metrics to prove our value and the value of our work as an organization. And I think we also, as fundraisers, need to be able to articulate why our work is valuable to the communities that we work in, apart from a fickle, let's be honest, statistic like a like or a share. Because beyond that, we serve a really important function in our communities and in this country. And I think that it's always important, not that you should, not share those statistics because they're really tangible and wonderful, but I think we also as fundraisers need to be able to kind of zoom out to a higher level to talk about, in the grand scheme of causes that people can support, the services that we're offering are just as valuable as other things like museums or cultural institutions. And I think to be able to articulate that is really important. And that articulating that can't always be backed up by clicks and likes, because, as nonprofit news organizations, we're not driven by those. We're driven by the fact that what we do is essential. So I don't think that answered the question. Mariko, you may want to step in and actually answer it.
Yeah, and it's been a really rewarding part of the fundraising work. And yeah, I'll just say that the metrics are a powerful tool, but it's just a small kind of lens into kind of like the overall picture of the power of our work. We have been focused a little bit more, so less necessarily on reach, less on shares, and a little bit more, one of my colleagues uses the Audience Explorer dashboard, and that looks at breaking our audience into kind of 3 separate groups, with the top group being something called brand lovers. I don't know if other organizations are using this tool, but that's really looking at the people that are coming back to your site, I think 5 or plus times in a month. And so you're looking, again, for that habit, and that habit that then breeds kind of future loyalty, investment, and donations. But yeah, on top of that, we're looking, of course, at putting the impact of these stories kind of front and center too, telling that story of the stories. And early on, this doesn't happen all the time, but we were able to put kind of like a 1-pager together, and an incredible timeline having to do with this education story. A little tip that one of my education reporter came across in a regular board meeting that kind of catalyzed, school board meetings that were looking for kind of gender equality in some of their sports facilities. That led to a lawsuit with the local ACLU chapter. So something like that, we were then able to kind of, yeah, not shop around, but yeah, share, I think, with our various audiences. So kind of we're looking, yeah, at both sides of the, on the metrics and storytelling.
Very cool. The next question that we have is from Allison with Investigate West. Allison asks, and this is a general question for the panelists as well, do you have thoughts on partnerships between local nonprofits on news stories so that we can all work together on initiatives and share fundraising resources to strengthen the journalism network?
I will say that here in Charlottesville, we have a very strong and active nonprofit community, but we have also chosen in the last recent, I guess, 2 years to no longer have advertising on our site. So one of the ways we've partnered with local nonprofits, because we no longer give them, for instance, free advertising, and that we just started during the COVID epidemic, is to do community commentary pieces on the site. And our news editor would know a little bit more about how they're vetted before they come in to us. But we did start publishing from other nonprofit leaders commentary pieces that don't have a one-to-one result for fundraising, but do share our audiences and allow them to promote that content to their audiences, which, you know, over time will grow both of our followings.
Yeah, similarly, we just very recently have made all of our content available for syndication and republication for free. We feel that it's an essential kind of part of what everyone's doing in journalism right now. It should be available to a lot of the smaller places, especially in places that don't have local reporting. But in terms of fundraising, I think we also share stories. We do a lot of partnerships editorially, but we haven't done a ton of fundraising kind of co-branding or working on stuff necessarily at this point. I think that it's important to keep those lines of communication open. I definitely have a lot of conversations with other people in the field in journalism in Texas, especially. Austin is kind of a bit of a media hub now at this point for both national and local journalism in Texas, and I think it's really important to keep those lines of communication open. And I know there's a weird development director protection of your people kind of thing that a lot of people have, and with also a city and a city of Austin size versus the state of Texas size, it's an interesting conversation because it's very likely that we do have a lot of the same donors. So it's kind of that makes that point moot to some degree to be really protective and not share who's giving to you per se.
Rico, I wanted to add in, so we don't share our donors because we don't have permission to do that. So you have to be very careful in terms of privacy issues, in terms of donor sharing, but collaboration is a tricky environment. There's been years and years and years of testing what works to reduce the kind of frictional costs of collaboration, the amount of advanced work and planning and trust building that needs to go into it before you do it. It's not a free thing. And so there's some great organizations now that really have a lot of experience in that, and the Center for Cooperative Media being one of them, just fantastic experience there. There's a really interesting conversation going on in the chat right now about what are we doing here and what kind of relationship do we have with our donors. And I actually would like to speak to that a little bit, if that's okay.
By all means, Steve, you have the mic.
Because it kind of tracks the conversation here. We do all of the usual kind of process measures of reach and traffic size and all that kind of stuff matters to us because, how are we doing with newsletter signups? How many subscribers are we converting to donors and all that sort of thing? Really important for the bottom line financials. But while doing that, we also are trying to do relationship building down through the donor file, through using various techniques to achieve that. At the major gift level, until the last 4 months, it was all about individual in real life contact. at the membership level, it was about really converting our conversation with donors and readers from a urgency only, almost transactional kind of relationship to a more strategic discussion about why are we here. And so we're very fortunate to have a CEO who knows how to do that, and then we can convert that into fundraising. It's worked really, really well. That's one of the advantages of the tools that we have available to us now, that we can do that without it costing huge amounts of money. And so we're really trying to integrate the strategic discussion about why journalism, why this kind of journalism in this moment across the different categories of donor giving, which is not the world that I grew up in, where, you know, you had your major gift, like high level discussions, and then you had like pants on fire email or direct mail that went out. And we've really tried to get away from that. And just one more thing I wanted to add here, and then I'll stop. The aha moment for me was a few years ago. We was doing this big campaign, and I was talking to this guy who I wanted to make a really major gift for us, large for us, not large in the great outside world, as part of this campaign. And up until that point, he had been like on and off $10,000 a year, something like that. It was like, I mean, frankly, it was walk around money for him. And we knew that he could do more. We knew he could do a lot more. And so I had a number in my head. And it had taken a year and a half of conversation to get to that point of like, okay, we're having lunch. We're across the table. He knows why I'm here. I know why I'm there. We're going to do this. This is like the epic moment of this gift relationship. And so we took care of the gift transaction in like 5 minutes. It was like done. And then I said to him, like, so, you know, this is our history with you. What is motivating you to make this decision to really significantly increase your gift in a way that you've never done with us before? And I thought he was going to start talking about, man, you guys are like punching above your weight, and you're doing this great investigative reporting, and you put that guy in this and that. And none of it. Instead, what he ended up doing was talking about growing up as a kid in Boston and having dinner table conversations with his mother and father and siblings about the state of the world. And it turns out that his father was this working class Irish guy who had done well and become a doctor and married up. And so that the donor was living in a very well-off environment, but his father was rooted in his working class history. And he carried that set of values to the dinner table conversation and communicated that with this guy who's in his 80s now. He never forgot it. So when the opportunity presented itself, like we had proven to him, we can do the work. We're not going to embarrass him if he gives us money. And when the decision point came, it was like, I get that. Like, you're actually helping me to express the highest and best values, as somebody said over there in chat, of who I am in the world. And I value that. So that was like, of course, that's what we're supposed to be doing. And so I really learned from that experience to really try and develop the relationship with somebody and tap into that part of our lives, as well as proving that we're really good at what we do, which we all are. And so anyway, just wanted to share that.
That's such a cool story, Steve. I do like one of the challenges that when I kind of walked into nonprofit news was like how to get to that emotional sticking point that sometimes it's so easy to do when, say, you know, I had worked a little while for like Teach for America and stuff, and you bring someone into a classroom and they see a classroom of children and kind of that education process. But like, what, as we as nonprofit organizations, how do we zero into kind of something that pulls a little bit more at someone's, I guess, heartstrings and like deep-seated, yeah, like you said, those like value systems. So thanks for that story.